Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. I have so much to say about Exoprimal. This is going to be my spoiler-free review. I know I've done other kind of early looks in the past. I've done a couple Sizzler reels on my channel, even on the YouTube Shorts, where you can see little snippets of gameplay I've put together talking about this experience. But now that I have officially rolled credits on it, I can give my final thoughts on leveling and story and gameplay and longevity and everything about Exoprimal. And that is what this video will be today. I can tell you, if you don't want to stick around to the whole thing, my recommendation is absolutely go play this game. It is on Game Pass. I would debate paying full price for it, not because the game isn't phenomenal, but because the pacing of the game isn't perfect. And if you're not willing to slog through some parts in the middle, you may not experience the full thing the game has to offer. As a result, I think the player population is going to plummet in this game, and that worries me for the longevity of a live service game. So keep that in mind. But if you are like me and you knew it was coming out and you were excited for it and played and got nice high quality matches all the way through, you probably grinned from ear to ear, even during those parts that weren't nearly as fun as much as I did. Exoprimal is a very interesting hero-based dinosaur shooter PvPvE. It filled a void that has longed in our lives ever since Turok, of us taking out larger-than-life dinosaurs by hitting them in weak spots, whether they be T-Rexes or Stegosauruses or some of the other more mutated variants. I did say this would be spoiler-free, and I'm going to stick to that. But if it's dinosaur-based, you're probably going to fight it in this game. And there are a litany of exosuits to dive in, whether you want to be a tank, whether you want to be a support class and heal people, or whether you want to be damage. Do you want to be a sniper like I played in this video, or do you want to be melee? Do you want to spec and be an all-rounder, or do you want to go full defense, or do you want to go full offense? Well, the choices are yours, and the game has a litany of options for you to select via cores and different pieces of gear via this utility slot that will allow you to change how you play the game. Teamwork makes the dream work, and no matter how heroic you are or not, you will not be able to do this alone. Thankfully, you'll play every match in groups of 5, sometimes 10, as you take on waves and waves of increasingly difficult dinosaurs through this demolished city known as Bikatoa Island. And throughout the adventure, you will visit a lot of really cool places, many times, sometimes left to right, right to left, up to down, down to up. There's different parts of the island to explore, and as the game opens up farther and farther on, as it progresses in the story, you will see more and more things, and more challenges will become available. But there is a caveat with that, and that's the pacing system that I talked about earlier. So how this game works is every time you play by yourself, you will progress the story. Whether your team wins or loses, you will gain experience that goes towards an overall meter, and once that meter is filled, you will unlock little story nodes. Story nodes are sometimes just these little data files that you can read with some voiceover that start to explain the various mysteries of the island. Once you have enough, the game will roll them all up into a 3 to 5 minute cutscene in which the characters will explain to you everything you just saw. So if you're a diehard lore buff and you want to read every little snippet of every little data file, you're going to get a lot of great information and exposition into this world. If you don't care about that, just wait till the roll up. It'll do a good enough job to explain the key elements that you need to understand, the key villains, the key heroes, why they're doing what they're doing, etc., that will allow you to progress through the story. After you've collected enough of those cutscenes, you will then play a variation of the multiplayer that is kind of unique to where your progress is. Again, this all happens when you play single player. If you play multiplayer, you go to the lowest common denominator. So if you're one mission away from the end of the game and your buddy who has never played before decides to try it out, all of those cool game modes, all of those cool dinosaurs, all of those cool story elements will be locked behind that player, and you're going to have to watch boring cutscenes. You're going to play the not fun game modes because the game is going to kind of reset back to where they are. So as much as I love playing with Matt, and he's been a great ally in this whole experience with me, I decided that I needed to blow through the game and see how it ended on my own. When I go back and play with him, he's maybe 25% through the story. So a lot of the locations and a lot of the enemies that we're going to fight aren't going to be things he's unlocked yet. So that's what I mean about it is kind of misleading. You may get stuck in that slog where you're playing with a lot of people, or you start partying up with new people you've met and they're not as far as long as you are, and you're going to have to kind of churn through that middle part over and over. Now, the highlight of the game is always the end of each match, which sometimes feels like a punishment or a chore, ultimately because a lot of the first part of the game is the same. It's still fun. It's awesome. You can play as any of those characters. You can switch exosuits on the fly. You can try out your new upgrades. You can level up the various characters through the kind of 3 or 4 missions that you play leading up to the final mission. The final mission is always kind of the best and the most exciting, and those last few minutes are definitely where all of my highlight reel footage comes from, where the most exciting, intense moments, where the most risk reward is met in the game. In those final missions, depending on if you queued as PvP or PvE, you will either go on a race to take out harder and harder enemies, the first team wins, or you'll play an objective that allows you to go and fight the other team, and the kind of winner of pushing the objective wins. You can win purely by playing the objective, but most likely you're going to have to fight the other team in some PvP at some point, and typically the team that does the best PvP is going to win. And I love that. I want more of that PvP. I want more of those arenas from the beginning. They don't exist in this iteration of the game. I'll talk about my frustrations with live service in just a moment. As you progress through the game, as I mentioned, the missions will become more and more difficult. Story elements and villains and heroes that you meet along and that you uncover their story via those data files that I told you about will begin to make appearances in the game. They will directly influence the missions you partake. They will directly influence the boss fights that you have at the end, because they're trying to help or hurt you depending on where you are in the story. You play as Ace, the silent protagonist, who is stuck in this time loop, who has to keep fighting over and over against this sadistic AI known as Leviathan. Leviathan is trying to create the perfect fighter by forcing you to fight over and over and over to become better and better and stronger. Canonically, when you lose, you kind of die, and that's what kind of resets. Only the strong survive. And the story does take some twists and turns, but ultimately I thought it was very satisfying. It absolutely has that CAPCOM polish that I think a lot of people have grown to love and respect. The engine runs very, very smoothly. I experienced absolutely 0 crashes or bugs or any progression problems throughout my entire, I think I played 70 matches when it was all said and done. The golden path, by the way, that is you not playing with other people, I believe is somewhere in the 40s. But again, because I played a lot with Matt and he wasn't as far along as I was, there was a lot of matches where I did not gain any progression in the story, and I was just playing to level up my Exo Fighter, which, by the way, was tons of fun. I didn't mind that at all. But I wanted to see how the story ended. That's why I cut him loose and did it on my own. But if he gets on tonight, I'm sure we'll jam out and play some more, because I'd love to continue leveling all these characters. They all have really cool perks that become more, and they become more and more powerful as time goes on, obviously. So your mileage will vary with this game because of the progression system and depending on what style of character you want to play. Regardless of what you do, the game runs and sounds beautiful. As I said, there were absolutely 0 issues I had with anything. The monsters and the dinosaurs that you will fight throughout the game are very beautifully animated. There's none of that dropping frames for enemies that are far in the horizon. I remember the first time I played Halo 5 Guardians, I remember seeing Protoss in the Prometheans in the background, and when they would run, they dropped to like 20 frames a second when I was playing a 60 frame per second experience, and it looks so jarring. This game doesn't have that. The frame rate is the frame rate. They've done a phenomenal job of adding sometimes over 1,000 different enemies on the screen, and they all are animated and move beautifully. I would have liked to see some variation in the dinosaur models themselves, because every single raptor looks identical. You don't have some raptors that are different colors or have different markings or attack differently. They're all kind of the same. But short of that complaint, the action is fast and furious. There's a lot of verticality to the game. There's a lot of movement tech to the game, and it definitely rewards you if you know how to use your skills for your suit the right place at the right time. And it absolutely rewards teamwork. The team that fights together wins together. Now, a really cool thing that happens throughout the game numerous times is, depending on if you're winning or losing, there are catch-up mechanics in the game which allow the enemy team or your team to do various challenges in order to make it more difficult for the other team to progress. This could be summoning enemies that are much more difficult for them to fight, more quantity of enemies, or you can just get in a dinosaur known as a Dominator and do it yourself. And that's a ton of fun to figure out when it makes sense to give up your team's progression to move on to and engage enemy teams. And there's this really cool risk reward of when their Dominator comes out versus maybe your Dominator coming out, and depending on the game mode that you're doing, will have radically different impacts on how they progress. And you can absolutely steal victory from an enemy team if you have a good Dominator on your team. And it's a really, really cool mechanic. One that we saw, I think really the first time I ever saw it was Gambit mode in Destiny 2. So if you're familiar with that, kind of who goes through that portal to fight the enemy, that's how the Dominator plays out here, and it's a lot of fun. Now, my frustration as I kind of wrap up this video regarding the whole idea of a live service and will the game have legs and longevity. Unfortunately, all live service games evolve through their lifespan, sometimes better, sometimes worse. This is definitely a game that came out that I think has good bones, mechanically, visually, gameplay-wise, the story, all really, really good, but all could be better. And during one of the Capcom Directs, the game developer said, hey, listen, we are aware that you guys want more. We know you like these raid styles where all 10 exo fighters are fighting against larger-than-life odds and larger-than-life enemies. We're going to give that to you, but just not now, so wait a while. So you have to kind of play through the story and wait it out, and then eventually they're going to add this mode where you're going to be able to have that more frequently. You don't have that now. I would love to do nothing but play the final level of this game over and over and over again, because it is one of the most epic boss fights I think I have ever had. And unfortunately, unless I'm playing with a friend who is past that, or potentially a group of players who have all gotten past that, I'm probably not going to see it again for some time, which is very, very disappointing because it was really, really cool. Instead, I'm going to be stuck with those handful of game modes early on. And that's the problem with a live service game. And I think a lot of people who are trying this game who haven't put in the time that I have, which I'm going to say is probably north of 15 hours at this point, playing a lot of the kind of repetitive matches, although mixing it up again with various characters. You know, I leveled up Roadblock, I leveled up the Witchdoctor, I leveled up Tempest. Like, I'm working through different classes because I want to try different things. But it does feel very samey. You just kind of have to wait it out until the next season comes along, where they're going to add new things. They're going to add alpha variants to all the suits, which are going to unlock an entirely new set of skills which can complement the existing characters now, which is really, really cool. They've announced a crossover with Street Fighter, where you're going to get to play with Mecha Ryu and Mecha M. Bison, who are going to have their own unique skill sets and powers. They've announced a crossover with Monster Hunter. We don't really know what that means yet, but I assume you're going to get Monster Hunter-esque weapons. Maybe some of that gameplay. Maybe we're going to get a Silk, where we can do some really crazy dashes in this game. I don't know yet. But it gets us all excited. And it's just not here yet. When you look at the player count, yes, it is on Game Pass, which helps a ton, but it's low. And that worries me. And that's why at the top of this video, I said, listen, you may want to wait, because when the new really cool stuff comes out, people might not be around and you're going to have lower quality matches. That doesn't mean Capcom's going to abandon this game overnight, but look at the history of live service games in general, and a lot of them that don't get that initial drive of players fade off in a year or two. I wouldn't be surprised if Exoprimal is an experiment that doesn't last more than 2 or 3 years because they're not injecting money. People aren't buying the premium battle pass because you're unlocking so much stuff with Bitcoin and able to buy and customize the character you want. I don't know. But what I do know is that right now, at this moment, this game is amazing. And even though I just rolled credits on it, even though I've completed the main story, I still want to go back and continue to level other Exo fighters. I still want to go back and play with my friends and show them how cool this game is and team up and try to crush the competition in different ways and use all the synergies available to us with communication to just really drive, some really high scores and have a lot of fun doing it. But those moments may be farther and farther between as people drop off and move on to other experiences. So keep that in mind as you play and dive into the content. But for me, what I experienced, what I saw, absolutely world class, absolutely loved this game, absolutely adored it, absolutely recommend it. The name of the game, Exoprimal. Do yourself a favor and check it out. Thank you guys so much for watching. Take care of yourselves. And until next time, I will see you guys on the other side.